The normative Coase and Hobbes theorems. We have been speaking thus far as if the Coase theorem's only lesson for property law is that the law should determine the level of transaction costs and react accordingly. But we can go further. Thus far, we have spoken of transaction costs as if they are exogenous to the legal system. That is, as if they are determined solely by objective characteristics of bargaining situations outside the domain of the law. This is not always the case. Some transaction costs are endogenous to the legal system, in the sense that legal rules can lower obstacles to private bargaining. The Coase theorem suggests that the law can encourage bargaining by lowering transaction costs. To illustrate numerically, if the surplus from exchange is $25 and transaction costs are $30, then the parties can obtain a net benefit of $25 to $30. That should be $25 minus $30 equals negative $5 from a private agreement. In other words, at least one of the parties will lose from private exchange. A rational person will not voluntarily trade at a loss. So, private exchange will not occur among rational people when the net benefit is negative. If, however, law lowers transaction costs to $30, then the net benefit of exchange is $25 minus $10 equals $15. When the surplus exceeds transaction costs, the net benefit from private exchange is positive. So both parties can gain from private exchange. Private exchange will ordinarily occur among rational people when the net benefit is positive. Lowering transaction costs lubricates bargaining. An important legal objective is to lubricate private bargains by lowering transaction costs. One important way for the law to do this is by defining simple and clear property rights. It is easier to bargain when legal rights are simple and clear than when they are complicated and uncertain. To illustrate the rule, first in time, first in right, is a simple and clear way to determine ownership claims. Similarly, requiring public recording of property claims makes determining ownership easier. Further, making those records searchable on the internet may lower transaction costs even more. You will encounter many examples throughout this book of other ways that law lubricates bargaining. By lubricating bargaining, the law enables the private parties to exchange legal rights, thus relieving lawmakers of the difficult task of allocating legal rights efficiently. Superscript 13, which reads, as we shall see in Chapter 8, contract law may be seen as an application of the normative Coase theorem, in that much of the area of the law may be seen as an attempt to lower transaction costs of concluding consensual agreements. We can formalize this principle as the normative Coase theorem. Structure the law so as to remove the impediments to private agreements. The principle is normative because it offers prescriptive guidance to lawmakers. The principle is inspired by the Coase theorem because it assumes that private exchange in the appropriate circumstances can allocate legal rights efficiently. To illustrate the principle's application, the dramatic worldwide trend toward privatization in the 1990s removed many regulatory impediments to private agreements. Besides encouraging bargaining, the legal system tries to minimize disagreements and failures to cooperate, which are costly to society. The importance of minimizing the losses from disagreements was especially appreciated by the 17th century English philosopher Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes thought people would seldom be rational enough to agree on division of the cooperative surplus, even when there were no serious impediments to bargaining. Superscript 14, which reads, because Hobbes wrote in the 17th century, he did not express himself in quite these terms, but this kind of argument is persuasive in his classic work, Leviathan, 1651. The modern idea underlying the pessimism of Hobbes concerning distribution is the fact that game theory has no generally accepted way to choose among core allocations. Returning to the text, their natural cupidity would lead them to quarrel unless a third stronger party forced them to agree. These considerations suggest the following principle of property law, which we may call the normative Hobbes theorem. Structure the law so as to minimize the harm caused by failures in private agreements. 15. This idea is developed at length in Cooter, The Cost of Coase, 11 J. Legal Stud. 1, 1982. According to this principle, the law should be designed to prevent coercive threats and to eliminate the destructiveness of disagreement. When the parties fail to reach a private agreement where one is in fact possible, they lose the surplus from exchange. To minimize the resulting harm, the law should allocate property rights to the party who values them the most. By allocating property rights to the party who values them the most, the law makes exchange of rights unnecessary and thus saves the cost of a transaction. To illustrate, the normative Hobbes theorem requires the law to create open range, that is, ranchers' rights, rather than closed range, or farmers' rights, in situations corresponding to our previous example. These two normative principles of property law minimize the harm caused by private disagreements over resource allocation. The normative Hobbes theorem and minimize the obstacles to private agreements over resource allocation. The normative Coase theorem have a wide application in law. In combination with the Coase theorem discussed earlier and its corollary, these principles will form the heart of our economic analysis of property law in the remaining of this and the following chapter.